Welcome to Connecting Communities. I'm your host, Nancy Bacci. Today we're going to spend some time talking about the very important issue of housing. With me today is Michael Filoni, Director of Housing for the City of Somerville, and Kelly Donato, Director of Special Projects for the city as well. Thank you both for coming on today. And as I said at the beginning, housing is such an important issue in the city. You know, we hear so many stories from people really running the gamut. People who want to live here, people who are trying to afford to still be able to live here, new development being created. There are so many areas I feel we could talk for shows about this, but we are going to try to hit on some really important areas. So, Mike, I know you wanted to start off talking about the Mayor's Sustainable Neighborhood Project.
Yes, thank you for the chance to be here, and we're eager to talk about the work of Mayor Curtatoni's Sustainable Neighborhoods Initiative. It actually goes back to last fall, was when the mayor announced this program, this initiative, before a meeting of the Board of Aldermen's Housing and Community Development Committee. And it involves a 6-point plan that we're just now beginning in earnest to really pursue. And I say just now because we've been working for several months to create and ultimately have the mayor select an affordable housing neighborhood working group, the Sustainable Neighborhoods Working Group, which really we hope to have serve as a laboratory of sorts about over the next 6 months or so to work looking more deeply and exploring new additional potential areas as ways to broaden and deepen the city's affordable housing efforts, along with the 5 or 6 points that were part of the mayor's initial announcement. We'd be glad to talk about those specific areas in more detail.
I think it's important, as you just mentioned, the idea of like community input and really having these sort of task force and advisory groups, because you know, we're a tightly knit city in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you, with the recent snowfall, we've become a lot closer as a city. But you know, I look at the positive. It gives you a chance when you're out there shoveling to connect with your neighbors and kind of find out what's going on with them as well. So it's an interesting initiative moving forward, and I'm certainly eager to hear more details.
Yes. Well, we were very fortunate to have over 60 individuals, residents, and some people who work in housing development or management in Somerville express interest in serving. And it's really, frankly, been a bit of a difficult process to get down to sort of a workable number where you can really have some substantive discussions and deepened explorations of specific subject areas. But we've ultimately named 29 people and are just announcing the members this week. The city, in fact, just issued a press release on that today that you can look for. And in terms of the areas that the group will focus on initially, the first 5 points of the plan, the initiative the mayor announced last fall, begins with something called the 100 Home Strategy. And that's a plan to work with a very highly regarded private nonprofit who a lot of people know in Somerville Community Corporation, to really try to get on the ground to be able to acquire most likely smaller properties that right now are on the open market are just going for prices that are just out of the reach of people who may have been living in them as rental property for years. And so one of the primary goals of that initiative, which we hope ultimately, if it's successful, we'll be able to grow beyond 100 properties initially, is to preserve existing tenancies and through that, have people be able to stay in Somerville who have lived here for a number of years, sometimes their entire lives. The second area has really been underway for several months, and I'd be surprised if you haven't already had my colleague George Perlakis from the Planning and Zoning Department here. So if you've talked with George, you've talked with the maestro of comprehensive zoning reform, which is a very active area and involves several components supporting and expanding our affordable housing efforts, including inclusionary zoning. And then quickly, the 3 other main areas, 2 of them would involve the need for legislation at the state level. The first would be to enable the city to provide a tax credit or incentive to benevolent, what we're terming benevolent property owners who want to provide a rent that households in Somerville, that people who don't have great means can afford. And as an incentive to do that for a given amount of time, we would provide a tax credit as an incentive. And then finally, or the second area of state legislation is a local transfer tax. And the goal of that would be to create a tax that would really serve two purposes. One, it would target selected kinds of transactions, what are sometimes called speculation or flipping, where basically someone, usually just a cash buyer, will come in, pay a certain amount, basically empty the building of existing tenants, and then flip it to another purchaser who may develop it for higher end condos, for instance. And that, again, displaces existing households, disrupts households, puts kids in the position of finding new schools, perhaps in the middle of the school year. So a transfer tax would enable us, we hope, to both impede or slow those kinds of transactions, and to the extent they are taking place, provide an additional resource for affordable housing efforts through the amount of the tax paid by people involved in those transactions. And then lastly is an exciting area that we hope to get underway sometime in the spring or summer, and that's an innovative affordable design competition. Kylie and I just had a meeting on that today, in fact, where we hope to basically really provide a laboratory of sorts for architects to think about and ultimately submit proposals for design of affordable housing, especially housing geared to reflect the ways people live today. You know, it's in some ways a lot different than even, say, just 50 years or so ago, in terms of the advent of some certain forms of technology that just create very flexible opportunities for how you set up your house. People use their dining rooms less now. They may be starting a business within the home. And how do we spur innovation both in terms of affordability, best practices in terms of sustainable design and construction, while also making it affordable?
There are so many different issues. I mean, things were coming to my mind as I was listening to you talk, you know, live workspace and family-sized housing, and, you know, the multi-generations that you used to see in a triple-decker aren't necessarily happening anymore. And really finding innovative ways to address all of those concerns. And as we know, Somerville is always, you know, cutting edge and serves as a model city in so many ways. So I imagine the work in housing is going right along that path. I was a little remiss when I welcomed you to the show in not welcoming you on board. You are one of newer city staff, so could you give us just a little bit about your background and what brought you here?
Sure. I to begin at the beginning, grew up next door to Somerville in Cambridge. And,
we'll let that slide, Michael.
But, you know, I do say to people, I spent a lot of time at the Gore Street rink right next to the Somerville border, and so, you know, have crossed back and forth with that incident for a long time, and I'm very, very glad and excited to be here. But I started out working in affordable housing, in public housing, in the public sector, and did that almost as a first job out of college. Really confirmed and deepened my interest and passion for the subject. Went to graduate school for a master's degree in planning and city planning particularly, and have continued working in the field both in the private sector, consulting for a while, and most recently, prior to coming on board here, directing a private nonprofit that worked in Boston's Hyde Park and Rosendale neighborhoods, the Southwest Boston Community Development Corporation.
Excellent. Well, you have quite a varied background, so we're very fortunate to have you on board, and I admire the dedication you bring to the work. You can really hear it in your voice when speaking with you about, you know, the passion that you feel for this work. It's such a pressing concern for people, and one thing that came to mind as well during our last round of ResiStat meetings, there were slides up that showed information of the percentage of their income that people were paying towards housing. And, you know, people come to these meetings looking for all sorts of information, but I felt that that slide was almost like a showstopper. People would look up and then they'd look and go, the percent, you know, when you see the people, and these are your neighbors, these are us, these aren't, you know, people that you don't know. This is happening across the gamut with people, and you realize for something that's such a basic need that you have to have and have to provide for, and the amount of money that it takes to maintain that sense of stability is really heart-wrenching sometimes. And that is going to segue us into Kelly Donato, who we said is Special Projects Director, and again has worked for the city for a while and brings a level of commitment to the job that's always happy to see. And I've had the opportunity last year and a little bit this year to speak with you regarding the homelessness issue, particularly the youth count. And again, I think this is an issue that while people are aware of on kind of the periphery, I don't know that people have as much knowledge that they should, honestly, about what a pressing concern this is. So again, thank you for coming. And while, you know, it's not the happiest of information, it definitely is information that we all need to know. So I know you wanted to talk a bit about the youth homelessness.
Thank you so much, Nancy. So just to give a little bit of background, the focus on youth homelessness really began with the state in 2012 when they convened a special commission on youth homelessness. And then last year was the first year that across the state we initiated a homeless count in all of the different continuums of care. So this will be actually our second year that we're doing this. We were fortunate enough to receive a $5,000 grant from the state in order to help assist us with the homeless count. We have a survey this year in both English and Spanish, and we also have a website as well where youth can take the survey, and it helps them maintain a sense of their anonymity through the process, which has been a concern. And this population has especially been a difficult population to get good data on. Part of it is, you know, their reluctance to come forward and their nervousness about what will happen in their future, whether they go into a system or not. And then also different counts have focused on different age ranges for how they define youth homelessness, as well as different homeless definitions. So it's been a very difficult group to capture and get good data on to help us make informed policy decisions. Last year, we collected 56 surveys, and of those 56 surveys, 24 met the state definition and 18 met HUD's definition. And also of the 56 surveys, 9 were identified as potentially at risk of homelessness.
Again, I mean, the data is always so important, but I really like this year how you said there's the opportunity to submit the survey online because, you know, as we had said earlier when we were chatting, you know, these issues that people are coming, seeking services and resource information about, it's not the easiest thing to talk about. And when you speak with young people, you know, they're not as quick to self-identify as being homeless, and I think really understanding the parameters of the definition because, you know, they're like, well, I'm not living at home with my parents, but I'm staying at my friend's house this week and I have plans, you know, in 2 weeks I'm going to this friend's, or I have a relative coming I can stay with, and, you know, the term that everybody uses is couch surfing, but really understanding, you know, what it means to be homeless and really understanding again that there are resources available, there are services, and how important it is to have an accurate count of this.
Right. One thing to note as well is we currently have 76 homeless youth within Somerville, and that's from pre-K all the way up through high school. So it is concerning, and a part of our approach to this youth count is being fortunate enough to partner with some of our great agencies within the community. We're working closely with the Justice Resource Institute, Justice Start, Wayside Youth and Families, as well as Teen Empowerment, in order to help get these youth connected to the resources that they need. And all of those agencies are also helping us to train some youth ambassadors as well to reach out within their peer networks and hopefully establish a connection with folks and help tie them into some much needed services.
I think that part is really important to emphasize as well because, you know, while we're all geared clearly towards public service and wanting to provide this information, I think it's very different when you're able to hear about resources in kind of an offhand manner, you know, while other things are going on. You have these youth who are trained as ambassadors, and then, you know, you're able to talk at lunchtime, or, you know, you're on your way to the library, or you're at practice for a sporting, you know, club or something. And there's a way to share the information that doesn't sound like a lesson being taught, or, you know, it doesn't really change the power dynamic of a friendship. You know, you know about sports, so you can tell me what I should be looking for when I'm watching the Patriots win the Super Bowl. I happen to know about this, I can share that information back with you. I think it helps to keep things on a more even keel while clearly empowering the young people to feel that they have the ability to make an impact on their community on such an important topic.
Right, exactly. And on that note, we're hosting a kickoff event at Teen Empowerment on February 25th. It's a Wednesday. It's going to start at 3 and go till 7. We'll have some pizza there and be able to start administering these surveys. And the surveys will be administered all the way through Tuesday, March 3rd.
And do you have, how long does it take once the surveys are submitted to kind of get all of your information relevant?
In terms of the data that we're collecting, we keep track of those as they come in, and then we also share that information with the state as well, so we can get a picture of what's happening across the entire state.
So it really is a snapshot in time. So it's not kind of like finding it out, then you have to wait 6 months for the data to be crunched and processed. You're really able to kind of see what's happening as it's happening.
Correct.
Which is great. It's such an important service. And again, as you said, being fortunate to be able to do it last year and this year, then you can identify trend data and, what are you seeing in terms of improvement in areas? What other new resources that are available that people are hearing about, and really kind of finding a way to hopefully just get a better ending for everyone involved.
Yes.
Right, and we're getting some best practices too out of this outreach as well in terms of how to connect with this youth population.
And I love the fact that you're partnering with all of our community agencies, because again, they have the connections in place, and it's just such a good opportunity, again, to let them know more about the workings of the city and understand the resources we have available to the community and really strengthen all of those partnerships. So, as I said, it's really a great initiative you have going forward, and I hope that it's very successful this year, even though it seems kind of bad to be wishing for success in that. But at least by identifying this, you're then able to really have some sort of say in allocation of resources and really helping, I think, to shine a very bright light on something that is a huge concern.
Right. And it also coincides with our annual point-in-time count that we report to HUD on for our homeless population in emergency shelters, transitional shelters, as well as our street count. Last year, we conducted the point-in-time count and counted 154 people, of which 4 were homeless on the street, and the rest were in emergency and transitional shelters. So it's also perfect timing with the youth count as well, and that's going to be happening the overnight of February 25th into the early morning hours of February 26th.
And I would imagine at this time of year, as probably happens every year, shelters are probably clearly taxed. You have the unbelievable cold, the multiple feet of snow we've had this year, really just kind of straining everyone's capacity, I think. So again, having more data, as we know, resources are allocated based on, data. Funding is awarded based on the data. So having as much information as possible and really having the means and the supportive staff to collect that data, I think really helps further all of your initiatives. So it's great to hear about that. We've mentioned resources a couple of times, and we always like to shine on the positive. So I know you had wanted to talk about some of the existing programs and resources available through the Housing Division.
Sure. We have a full inventory of existing housing programs. In terms of resources first, really one of the most exciting recent developments, really to the great credit of the people of Somerville voting residents, and with Mayor Curtatoni's leadership. 2 years ago, the city overwhelmingly, I believe by the widest margin in state history, passed the Community Preservation Act. And this is the first 2 years, where we will begin to realize the resources that came out of that decision. And so while the Somerville Affordable Housing Trust has been doing great work for decades now, basically with Community Preservation Act funds, the resources available for housing will go from, on average, about $500,000 a year to, again, a 2-year allocation, but of about $2.2 million. So that will just dramatically expand what the trust, which has been voted to be the designee for distribution of Community Preservation Act funds, what it can do in terms of encouraging and supporting financially the creation and preservation of affordable housing. in the city. And so we have other programs to talk about, but it may make sense for Kelly to talk about the biggest single program in terms of housing development, our inclusionary program, as she's really been the point person on that.
Thanks, Mike. So right now, for every 8 units of development, we get 12.5% designated as affordable, and in some cases in transit-oriented districts like Union Square, it's as high as 15 or 17%. And it's a very popular program. We probably get most of our calls around this program. And we have both home ownership and rental opportunities that come up as these developments come online, and it's available via a lottery process. So if people are interested, they can always contact us to get on our listserv. It's unfortunately not a wait list. You do have to apply for each opportunity, and there is an individual lottery for each opportunity, but you can get on our listserv so that way you can get a direct email anytime we have an opportunity available. We also advertise on the city's website, the cable wheel, Twitter, and Facebook as well. So if you're not on our listserv, you can also check there for more information.
Well, it's important. We were talking earlier about ways of promoting things as well, and really, you know, now with City, with the Summer Viva program, we have different language capacities in terms of disseminating information out to different populations, non-English speakers, really making certain, you know, that everyone is hearing about all of these amazing things. And I will say, before the show, I had gone on your website to do some refreshing on my own to find out more about different programs, and there is so much information on the website. I mean, you guys have so many different programs, and really kind of a quick and easy way to navigate to see, you know, I'm interested in lead abate, I'm interested in, you know, this, or I want to know more about the affordable housing opportunities. And there really is a nice way to navigate that through, because again, it's an issue this big. You know, I mean, housing is huge, and then, you know, to try to narrow it down to what people are looking for, like you said, home ownership, rental opportunities, is it, you know, the inclusionary zoning part of it. There are all of these other questions, I think, that one question just generates another kind of thing. And, you know, you have a really receptive staff, which is great.
Thank you.
Always have heard positive feedback. Another one of your staff, Vicki Wiry, who has always had really positive interactions with the community as well. And, you know, it's great to see that level of commitment from people, because, again, it's such an important yet such a basic need that sometimes it feels like maybe it could fly under the radar a little if you're not as well tuned in, because you're like, well, you know, housing. I mean, everybody needs housing. But then when you realize everybody needs housing, and as you said, some, you know, properties being converted, and then, you know, you have tenants who are no longer able to be there. You have people living in properties where rent was affordable, you know, the property changes ownership, and, you know, you can't fault someone looking to, you know, make a return on their investment, but, you know, there is nice to have the balance of that. So, I mean, one of the items you had mentioned earlier, you know, landlords that are being determined to be, you know, fair and kind to their tenants, you know, is really a nice way of giving someone the incentive to do the right thing, honestly.
And it's really, I think that's absolutely right. And it's one of the ways that community is created and cultivated and preserved. You know, I grew up in a triple-decker. My parents were the owners. And, you know, until my grandparents reached an age where they needed to move into one of the units, you know, it was basically those families there for the long term. And it really does facilitate, you know, the opportunity to get to know your neighbors and really become engaged in your neighborhood. So we absolutely want to do that, and are working to support that in a number of ways. The 3 areas I really want to focus on, just in terms of getting the word out, especially after this winter season that hopefully will end in the near future. Knock on
the wood for you.
Yeah, but it could, in fact, present an opportunity for folks who are looking to do work, whether it's to patch problems from roof dams or ice dams or what have you, we do have a housing rehab program that makes loans available up to eligible households. That's up to 80% of the area median income, which we can translate for people if they want to contact our office. We have a lead paint abatement program, which provides loans to eligible residents, again, for lead paint inspection and removal. And particularly, again, after such a dreadful winter season, heating system replacement is a particular area of funding that we have, and we'd be eager and glad to provide information to anyone who may be interested in any of those programs. And there are others that, that if we have time, Kelly may want to mention, but that's if we have time.
Well, we're coming to an end, but we definitely have a minute for you to take to touch upon something else. We want to provide as much information as possible and then give people the opportunity, if they're looking for more information, to contact you or to stop by 50 Evergreen Ave at the Annex Building and come in for more information. But we certainly have time for you to share one more.
Thanks, Nancy. Just to add on that, for first-time homebuyers who are income eligible, we have some great programs. We offer a closing cost assistance program, and we also offer a down payment assistance program. For the down payment assistance, it's up to 15% of the purchase price, which is great. And for closing cost assistance, it's anywhere between $3,500 to $5,000. And the closing cost assistance is forgivable as well. So it's one of our more popular programs for first-time home buyers purchasing in Somerville.
Excellent. As I said, it's just such important information, and there is so much of it. So I'm going to encourage everyone who was watching the show to call or stop by and really find out as much as possible, because, you know, like you said, we are a community. I mean, I look at my neighbors on each side and across the street, and they're all owner-occupied. They've lived here for 40, 50 years, you know, have family as their other tenants. And I know that's not the case everywhere, but it has definitely carved a nice little, you know, neighborhood feel out of it, which is we've relied on during the shoveling lately. But, you know, and just the sense, though, that's one kind of neighborhood. And then, you know, you go 2 blocks away and you have people more in transition, but it forms a different kind of neighborhood. And when you put that all together, you know, we really connect as a community, and we want the people who live here and want to stay here to be able to stay here. We want new people to come and find out how awesome it is to be here. So I thank you both so much for coming on, and if people have questions, they're certainly going to call or stop by your office. And again, we're encouraging everyone to fill out the survey, which we have the information on as well, and I hope that that turns out well. Thank you both so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As always, I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd like to thank the production crew, Joe Constantine, Steve DiCarlo, and George Wood. See you next month.